I'm Kathryn Zox, your social worker with a microphone, and you're listening to The Kathryn Zox Show.
Joining me today is attorney and author Michael Hackard, Esquire. His new book is Alzheimer's, Widowed Stepmothers, and Estate Crimes, Cause, Action, and Response in Cases of Fractured Inheritance, Lost Inheritance, and Disinheritance. Nearly 500,000 new cases of Alzheimer's are diagnosed each year in the United States, and nearly 6 million Americans currently live with the disease. Sadly, anyone with Alzheimer's or dementia is a potential victim of inheritance-related exploitation. Michael Hackard's book is an invaluable guide for the millions of Americans struggling with cognitively impaired family members and inheritance-related conflicts. He's practiced law for over 40 years and has been interviewed regularly by local and national media, including Wall Street Journal, MarketWatch, MSN Money, C-SPAN, and many more, and has testified before the House of Representatives. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you on, Michael.
It's great to be on. Thank you, Kathryn.
So unfortunately, well, we do need your book, fortunately, but unfortunately, I guess this problem of inheritance and disinheritance and all these kinds of ugly things that happen to people who, as they get older and maybe develop dementia or Alzheimer's, are really misrepresentative, maybe I guess more so that's kind of like maybe not a strong enough word, by their family members. And it is a real problem. And this is so, hence your book. So what is happening? I mean, this is something that is getting worse and worse to people because people live longer and sicker mentally, you know?
I think you have it right. People are living longer. So we see certainly a higher numerical incidence with, as 500,000 new cases per year of Alzheimer's. The other problem with it is there was a recent study that about 55% of all Alzheimer's patients are not even told of their disease and their families not told of the disease. So that's rather baffling because it creates all kinds of problems. One is it doesn't offer the family enough information to start instituting preventive measures. And even for the victim himself or herself, it's probably baffling as to what's occurring in their own mind. So, and
Michael, are you saying, I have to stop you, I want to stop you because you're saying that physicians, let's say you have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, or they know it, and then they don't tell you or your family? They keep it a secret?
Yeah.
Is that legal?
That's correct. That they don't always know. It's not terribly easy to diagnose, but and oftentimes the physicians may not be neurologists or psychiatrists that would readily identify it. So they're say family treating physicians, and we all know about healthcare. People get very little time with their physician, so they might ask some simple test like, what is today? Who's the president of the United States? Ask a few things like that, and figure people can answer that they're okay. But so that's part of the problem. There are new laws going into place to treat, or rather to teach nurses and general physicians as to the signs of dementia and Alzheimer's.
All right. Given that, let's say we have a parent, a relative or whoever it is who is, say, the trustee of an estate and has good intentions, then maybe we can assume there'd be a good outcome. But let's say they don't have good intentions, and you talk about different cases, I think, in your book, and maybe we should go through some of them of what can happen when perhaps a family member who is a trustee is not really interested in the best interests of the patient, but is more interested in their own, how much money they're going to inherit for themselves or their families. Then what happens?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the family members, and there are, again, studies about 60% of the primary financial abuse against seniors is started by family members. Caregivers are about another 15%, and then neighbors almost 20%. So what happens is oftentimes the family member starts with being dependent on the elder, on the parent. and maybe doesn't have a job, oftentimes alcohol or substance abuse problems. But as time goes on, that parent becomes wholly dependent on that child, to say if that child is living in the home. So it just degenerates into something like, I see it just so many times, degenerates so that the dependent child says, yeah, I'm the one that takes care of you. Everybody else doesn't care about you. And if you don't give me everything, or if the trust doesn't give me everything, then I'm going to leave and you're going to end up alone or kicked out of your house, or you're going to be completely alone. And of course, going along with this is isolation. I might add too, Kathryn, just because of the books, and so I've been at this so many years. We counted, but normally we're getting about 30 to 40 new calls or emails per week from people asking about this, oftentimes asking about the legal issues associated with it. So I hear these stories time and time again, and of course we're taking certain cases and going after people that abuse seniors.
Can you give us, obviously without revealing who the clients are, but the case history, the specifics of the case? Like if you're getting all those calls, 30 or 40 a week, there have to be a lot of different kinds of scenarios. Let's talk about some of those, because that was what makes it real and obviously makes it interesting and proves the point.
Yeah. Well, there are many, but I'll just cover a few that instantly come to mind. So a 90-year-old person whose life plan and estate plan has always been to split equally their estate between their two daughters. And one daughter dies, the other daughter lives further, or hundreds of miles away from the senior. But there's a neighbor nearby, and the neighbor basically unduly influences that senior to give her $250,000. There's also a caregiver who's in on the act to get $250,000. And in that particular one, there's a financial advisor as well who got his own interest at stake to be appointed as the trustee of the estate. And essentially, the surviving daughter gets cut out for the most part. So that's a situation I see time and time again. Other really common situations, we have several of them now pending. Again, it's the caregiver child who has substance abuse, hasn't worked for years, cuts out all the other siblings while the parent is alive and isolates, say, his mother against the other siblings. So other siblings even showing up at the door, they're told, you can't see mom, she's asleep, you just can't see her, or their telephone calls go unanswered. Mom's phone is gone, so that the only access is the caregiver's phone. And in those cases, you see sometimes transfers prior to death, and many other times it's just the trust itself has been changed. And oftentimes the last days of life change to benefit only the caregiver child and cut out everybody else. That, again, is very common. We have.
Let's take those two scenarios. I want to just, Michael, take those two scenarios. Yeah. And then what do you do? Let's say someone's calling you up and saying, this is the problem. I'm the daughter and I got cut out of, let's say in the first case, the financial advisor got $250 and the caregiver got $250. Everybody got the remainder of the estate except for me. So then what is what can that person do?
Well, we attack it in two different ways. One is in many courts of our nation, there are both probate courts as well as the civil courts. So in California, we attack in the probate court to show that the trust was the result of undue influence. That's one issue. Or we may also show that the decedent didn't have capacity to make the trust. And I'll talk about the ways to go about that are gathering medical records, testimony of people that knew the decedent, and then we'll have a neurologist or a geriatric psychiatrist review those records because they just know a lot more about it. That's one element. We also attack in the civil courts, and because we have particular statutes allowing for elder financial abuse civil actions that are subject to a jury trial and have a lower standard of proof called just the preponderance of evidence. For those that have sat on jury trials, in civil trials, they'll know that. It just means more likely than not. Some of the statutes also allow for attorney's fees assessment in those cases, and that's really a strong hammer against wrongdoers. And it's a hammer we regularly use. In fact, the legislature encourages it. They changed some laws to basically encourage families and lawyers to do civil enforcement of these rights. That's for people that have died. Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say is it very different in different states? I mean, the statutes are very different, or?
They're getting closer to each other. So I'm more familiar in the states with, say, Florida and California law. But there are efforts to not to make uniform laws with regard to it, but efforts to protect seniors. And so oftentimes these laws will reflect the more or the stronger laws, such as what California has or what Florida has.
What's the worst, if you can describe the worst case? I mean, you've been practicing for over 40 years, perhaps that you've seen.
Deathbed cases are tough cases. Sometimes where seniors have been ignored and isolated and don't even know who they are anymore, and I've seen this so many times, but seeing somebody show up at their deathbed, it could be a caregiver, it might be a family member freezing others out. Those are probably the most emotionally damaging to family victims. And that you could have a caregiver in the hospital telling the nurses that they're the daughter and no one else is to see the person who's dying. That does happen. They may have set things up beforehand so that they are the person designated on the advanced healthcare directive to direct the medical care. And I've had people coming into my office that one in particular comes to mind. Her father was dying in the local hospital. It was a stepdaughter had come in and claimed that she claimed she was the only child, so that the daughter herself couldn't get in to see her father. And her father soon died, and we litigated that case and resolved it. But those are sad cases because people just feel cut off from their parent that they've loved and have been, the major part of their life. And then to get cut off, and it could be the last days or even the last years. Those are tough cases.
Those are very sad cases. Is there any way, obviously you're writing this book, so it enlightens people and they realize that this can happen. Let's talk about how to prevent some of these scenarios. What can we do? Because maybe, a lot of us are going to live to be 80, 90 years old, and you don't necessarily have to have Alzheimer's, even dementia, but sometimes, as people age, their judgment perhaps isn't as good. And they're much, as you say, they're isolated. They tend to listen to the person who's there, who may not be the best person to give the advice and so how does that work? How can you sort of maybe mitigate some of this stuff?
I think it's mitigated by communication and open communication, and particularly access. Maybe not to withdrawing from financial accounts, but access into seeing what's happening in financial accounts. The other thing is to, enough visits to a parent to see what's going on in their own house, and are they taking care of themselves? Maybe they're hoarding. Are they? Does it look like they're losing properties? That's people that are ripping off seniors start with ripping off personal property. The other thing is just testing the seniors' psychological health, and this is what often happens is you show up to see your parent or grandparent, whatever that is, and the person appears to be afraid, and the local caregiver or the caregiver sits in the room or just outside the room to listen to everything that's going on, and oftentimes, if they're in the room, will answer on behalf of the senior. That's tough because usually what's going on in the senior's mind is they're afraid that if they say anything wrong, they're going to be in trouble with their caregiver and they're going to get punished. That's, again, a very common scenario.
Well, you've seen it. I mean, as I'm listening to you, I mean, it seems to me you've seen every combination, every permutation, every situation, I guess, that kind of, I mean, in your experience over the years, which it's sort of difficult, I guess, so in other words, try not to have the person be isolated. Seniors, I mean, that isolating them, that's a very effective way of manipulating people. And, you know, whether it's a caregiver or a stepdaughter or whoever it is. So other family members, number one, should be aware of that and make sure that that doesn't happen and have a connection, even if they live far away.
Exactly. And maybe the connection is a trusted neighbor. Obviously, not all people do bad things. There are a lot of people that reach out to others and help others and don't necessarily have their own interest at stake, but rather the senior's interest at stake. The other thing, too, the siblings should try to communicate with each other as to what's going on with the parent. Because if it's a sibling abuse, the abuser will not want to be communicating with the other siblings as to what's occurring.
What do you do in the case if you have say several siblings? And I've seen this over the years where you'll have maybe 2 or 3 siblings against one sibling. And so, if there are 4 siblings, it'll be 2 and 2. And so you have the siblings battling with one another. How does that fit into this?
It fits into it. And it's not always easily resolved. One thing that I suggest to people is that let's say that a parent does in fact want to favor one sibling over another for whatever reason, and let's assume for a good reason. So some lawyers in the country will suggest that senior actually get interviewed by a neurologist, or in my view, a geriatric psychiatrist is a better choice. To test whether that person has capacity and whether their decision to change their estate plan was the result of undue influence or rather was of their own free mind and will. That's a good thing, so that if you've got some sibling differences and you want to preserve that estate plan, that's a very good thing to do. And we do send people out to psychiatrists for a review. And we're not sitting in on it. It's an unfettered review. And we've actually had it come back before, well, this person really doesn't have capacity or he or she's been unduly influenced. And that helps us too.
What about
because
people?
That trust is not going to hold up if it was a result of undue influence.
Sometimes it's difficult for people, not just financially, but just in terms of their own motivation to get to an attorney like yourself. And they don't do it. I mean, they just, and even if they know something is going on, they, for whatever reasons, they don't seem to handle it. But can the whole process be made simple, I guess, or simpler than it is? You know, I've seen families where, they know this is happening but they just don't want to deal with it. Of course, until the very end. And then it gets the situation or the problem gets a lot more complicated.
Yeah, it is difficult. And what we do, and we get overwhelmed at times, and that part's tough. So as I say, that many calls, but we have one particular intake specialist that I then back up, and sometimes we'll have 2 intake people, and we probably only take about 3%, 5% of the cases that are presented to us. So at times when I speak to lawyers, I really encourage them to get smart in this area and to be responsive to their communities, to help teach people about elder financial abuse and how to protect elders. And we don't charge when we're talking to people. Sometimes people will call me and say, well, they've been to a local attorney who wants $300 or $500 to talk to them. People have to make a living, but the other side of it is, I think, start with giving out free information that's helpful to people, and then if it gets down to the specifics of a case, well, then engage that person as a client. But I think lawyers need to be more responsive in helping seniors out, because we have, I'm a senior. We have some 65 million baby boomers. 10,000 of us turn 65 every day in this country. This is a group of people that needs to be helped and needs to be served.
Well, I hope you're one of those people. I'm assuming you are one of those who helps. The shoemaker who doesn't have a good pair of shoes. That you're not one of those lawyers who helps everybody else but haven't helped themselves.
Well, that's funny, because actually we had gone like 20 years without changing our trust. It was a valid trust, and it worked. But then we have grandchildren and things happen, and so I have done more work recently to keep up to date in my own life.
Well, that's a good thing. How do you? This is sort of the personal side of it, I guess. You practice for all these years. You see all the, I guess, the bad things that people can do to one another. How do you keep up your own, good feelings and not get overwhelmed by some of this behavior, which is very sad. I mean, families who are together for many years and then all of a sudden at the end, everything falls apart. I mean, that has to have some kind of an impact on you.
It has impacts at times. It does. But for every day that I have, it's, there was this song by Don Williams. It's a country song, but the song is, Lord, I hope this day is good. And I think of that song at times. And so during my day, I do try to think, I am here to help people. It is overwhelming at times. And I think that lawyers that are on the other side of us at times, maybe I take it out on them a little bit, because if I think that if I've had one of those days where I'm irritated over what's happening to people, I think I can be tough on those lawyers. Although it's not so tough that we can't resolve it, nor do I try to be rude. We try to have collegiality, but maybe I take it out a little bit on the other lawyers.
All right. Well, I guess we can forgive you for that. This is kind of another social media. We don't have that much time left. Actually, we have 4 minutes left. Like, how can that help? I mean, you talk about information, and lawyers now are more active maybe in communities and lecturing and informing people, because how many baby boomers did you say? We have 65 million baby boomers.
65 million. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a lot of people. Online, are there reputable, like, online information things, stuff that we can get that give us sound, at least general legal advice is related to this topic? Yeah,
there are online resources. Oftentimes states will, if you look under financial elder abuse, states themselves will have summaries of law and maybe advice as to how to prevent elder abuse. What we put out on social media, I'm actually speaking today from our own studio, but we put up YouTube videos. They're normally 2 to 3 minutes each. And we have over 450 of them up. We do about 2 to 3 per week. And for the most part, I'm just trying to share information that, that I know and that's a little bit generic, but that can help people. And I think that's one of the reasons that we get so many calls. We oftentimes post, also on things like Facebook. It doesn't have the reach of YouTube, but we're responsive in that way. And I've encouraged other lawyers to do it. Maybe you just talk about what are people calling you about. Don't share, confidential information. But that's a very good test as to what's going on in the country, what's going on in your local community. Because if people are calling you about it, it's a problem.
Well, that's a great idea. And actually, I'm going to look at, you said 400, you're on YouTube. That's what, 2 or 3 minutes?
Under Hackard law. Yeah,
under Hackard
it's quite
law.
a few.
Yeah. Hackard law. Okay, that's easy. So, it's been great talking to you. We've got a lot of good information today. I think this is going to kind of propel people to go on YouTube and look at your YouTube information, Hackard law. But the title of the book is Alzheimer's, Widowed Stepmothers, and Estate Crimes, Cause, Action, and Response in Cases of Fractured Inheritance, Lost Inheritance, and Disinheritance. And we've been talking to Michael Hackard today, Esquire. Thanks so much for being on the show today. It was great talking to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.